We're looking at the wildfire devastation. Trump was greeted on the tarmac by the state's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, who he has blamed for the wildfire response. Standing next to Newsom, Trump told reporters, quote, "We are going to take care of things," which is a very different tone than he had just earlier today when he's talking about punishing California. While visiting areas affected by Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, which voted for Trump, which obviously makes a big difference in his mind, Trump floated the idea of withholding aid from California in the midst of the most expensive natural disaster of all time if they did not implement voter ID. He also said he wants to get rid of or overhaul the Federal Emergency Management Agency, better known as FEMA. Of course, that's the federal agency responsible for coordinating with state and local agencies after natural disasters.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. After that clip, I think we need no introduction to tonight's topic, and it's going to be strictly on FEMA. I'm not here to beat on any of the people in the background. I just think it's time that FEMA got its fair shake and everybody really knew who they were. A lot of you probably do know about them, or you know something about them, or you've been involved with them. If you have, thank you for your service. But FEMA, better known as the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is something that was started way back before 1930. Actually, it was started back in the 1800s, just after a set of devastating fires that overran the city of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They were destroyed in a series of fires that took out their banking and most of the downtown area, and they had little or no resources to try and come up with rebuilding their city and paying their tariffs, which was one of the reasons that the government wanted to help them. They needed to get their tariffs remitted into the government, and the government needed that money to operate on. So the government opened up a branch of the government and said, hey, we're going to send out people, we're going to send out help, and mostly they helped send out money too. It was, according to everything I've read, was considered the first legitimate piece of legislature passed by the federal government that was approved to help anybody during a disaster. Now, in one way or another, FEMA has touched most of your lives out there, whether it's you directly, relatives, friends, or people that you knew in your past somehow. FEMA was piecemealed together over different years. Starting in the 30s and heading up into the 60s, it was just out there. They took what was going on out of Portsmouth and just kind of let it run. Right about 1973, though, they changed hands inside the government, and they were considered part of the Department of Housing and Urban Development from 1973 until 1979. Again, responding to numerous disasters with what they had, what little budget they had, and what little resources they had, but it added to what the local municipalities and the states had to work with. Can you imagine? I mean, a lot of you listening to this already unfortunately know. But, you know, disaster comes along, rolls along, and wipes out something that you love and care for and have involvement in. And not only do you have the loss of your own, but the loss of your neighbors, but the loss of your community. And now you have to figure out, having just lost everything you own, how do you get funds? How do you get help? How do you get resources? How do you get information on how to rebuild, especially during those emotional times and the economic losses? Well, the government finally decided in 1979 under President Jimmy Carter that they needed to be able to help people. And they needed to be able to help them in a more efficient and proactive manner. So President Carter was responsible for bringing around several different things inside FEMA, including breaking it down into smaller departments so that they could deal with things such as financial management, disaster management, training, resources. I believe back in that time, Red Cross they probably still are to this day. I don't want to take anything away from Red Cross, but Red Cross's response with such things as clothing and food and shelter, temporary housing. And then again in 2003, it was upgraded yet again, and a budget was developed under President Bush. And FEMA was given a solid budget to work with. So they had something they could legitimately plan with, and they could say, okay, here's what we have. President Bush gave them a $30 billion budget, okay, which at the time seemed like a lot. In recent years, we've heard about FEMA running out of money and having to dip into next year's money or get an emergency group of money from Congress. By the way, Congress holds the purse strings on FEMA, and Congress is the one that gives them the money. It's not like Congress doesn't know what these guys are out there doing. It's not like Congress doesn't get a look at their budget, doesn't get a look at their training. And like in any business, if you haven't got a solid business plan, your financial people are not going to back you. But I digress. FEMA has resources available to them that allows them to bring skilled management, skilled medical recovery people, skilled structural recovery people, skilled municipality organization skills, things that I couldn't even begin to imagine were needed during a disaster. Running in a B clip, I'm going to start showing you some of these things here. And you know, yeah, there's a lot of American backing and a lot of American pride when things happen, very much like the Louisiana floods when I think they called it the Confederate flotilla showed up with their duck boats and their flat bottom boats and their gator boats and everything else like that to help recover people. Those people were amazing. They showed up out of nowhere, did a job that other people couldn't do, and then disappeared back into the woodwork. True American style. So along came the different teams, and FEMA is made up of, and I want to make sure I get this straight, they have a disaster medical assistance team. We're talking about doctors, nurses, skilled people that work with them. I believe they're called PAs, physician's assistants, and the like. I know when there was a disaster, a local doctor here that I knew took off and went to help them, and he took a couple of his team, and one of the people that was there was a records keeper who was a friend of mine. And that person was charged with keeping track of everybody that they saw and all the documentation for everything that happened to them. Now imagine that you've got thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that need things like this, and you don't have FEMA around. And then there's what's called the DMAT team, and they were deployed during Hurricane Ike. Hurricane Ike devastated Texas, tore it to pieces. Okay, these people, and by the way, DMAT, Disaster Medical Assistance Team, these are people that are running and gunning in the field. These are first responders. These are people with the ability to triage certain situations and get people the help that they need. Again, if you're living in one of these communities and you've just been hit by it, how much of a DMAT team do you think you could put together? Probably not a lot, because a lot of your people are already devastated. Unfortunately, many of them may not be with you anymore. And let's also face it, the facilities that they would need to be able to do this are gone. So if we aren't bringing people in and we aren't doing something from exterior, in other words, bringing resources to the scene like FEMA does, then you're not really getting a lot done in some of these disaster areas. Now, they also had, and this is one that caught me off guard, and I'm surprised it did, but the National Pharmaceutical Response Team, NNRT, okay? Yeah, okay, your local drugstore or your local supermarket where you get your drugs, or your local mail delivery post office where it's coming out to put the stuff in your mailbox. Yeah, they're gone. So who's doing this? Up pulls a FEMA truck, up pulls registered pharmacists, licensed pharmacists, with the resources to give you the pharmaceutical needs that you need to stay alive, or that you need to treat anything that happened to you while you're there. They're there. It reminds me of watching a commercial that was done for a soap manufacturer. I'm not going to say their name here because I'm not pitching for them, but what they did was they brought tractor trailers in that have soft sides on them, and when they opened up these low-level tractor trailers, in them were washers and dryers, and they dispensed soap and fresh water for washing to the people of New Orleans after Katrina went through there and leveled them. Okay? Things like that. You know, you see this on TV, you don't always remember it. I'm sure a bunch of you out there remember seeing that commercial on TV. Well, imagine that you've got a National Pharmaceutical Response Team. Now imagine that you've got a Veterinary Medical Assistance Team. How about a Disaster Mortuary Operation Response Team? How about a National Medical Response Team equipped to decontaminate victims of chemical and biological agents that are in the water, or to a disaster very much like, I believe it was the train wreck up in Ohio, where chemicals were released and people were exposed to them. This is all the type of thing that local municipalities don't have. If they did have it and the disaster hits them, they obviously don't have it anymore. They need outside help. Let's do one more thing before I bring my rant to a point here. FEMA has a training and education department within its operation. I'm sure that they employ a lot of first responders. I'm sure they employ a lot of volunteers. And I'm sure they employ a lot of professional people, very much like what I met when I was near something one time and two women walked up and I thought they were just bystanders. It turned out they were both doctors. They had been released from their duties in New York to be able to go to this area, and they were quite well equipped in what they needed to do. They just needed someone to tell them, where do you need me? These responders also need management to help guide them in what they're doing and to help coordinate the efforts. Imagine 10 doctors running around asking the same question of 20 different people. You need a manager. You need a site coordinator. FEMA provides these people. They provide an entire operation, lockstep with whatever the local community needs, because they have already spoken with them and they can point their people in the right direction. So I guess my rant is that there's talk with the current administration of doing away with or reorganizing FEMA. Now, the person that's talking about this probably has a concept, maybe, on how to run a disaster, which he's never been involved in, has no professional training in. I ask that person or people who could talk to him to have him reconsider. FEMA has saved thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives, and have coordinated for disasters that most of us would never want wished upon us or to be there. So I guess that's where my rant's going to end. I just felt so strongly about it tonight that I just had to put this out. I'm not calling out politics on this. I'm not calling out anybody. I don't want to see FEMA destroyed or disturbed unless someone can prove to the rest of us in the United States that call upon these people when we need them, that the person doing the reorganization has some sort of skill and has some sort of knowledge of disaster recovery. Anyways, folks, thank you for being here. I do appreciate your listening and your commenting. My subscribers, your numbers are just increasing. I can't believe you guys out there. Thank you so much. I am always humbled to see the numbers changing. Again, if you like what you're hearing and like what you see, hit the little subscribe and like button at the bottom. I would really appreciate the help in building this channel and keeping it going so that we can have more talks like this. Anyways, I'm going to wish you all a wonderful evening, and thank you.